About 5 months ago, I made a video titled Diablo 4 is Garbage, where I completely tore into the game, going over all of the problems that Diablo 4 had. Today, I wanted to make a video where we go and address all of the problems that I had brought up in that video and kind of discuss whether or not they still exist. We're going to break this down into 3 categories. The first category is going to be problems that still exist within the game. The second is going to be problems that appear to be fixed, at least in my opinion. And then problems that sort of fall somewhere in between. Let's go ahead and dive into the first part of this with problems that still exist within the game. Number 1, cosmetics from the cash shop, in my opinion, are still much cooler than the ones that you can obtain in the game, especially the ones that you get by going through the battle pass. Of course, the paid version ones look much better. I just opened up the shop to take a look at a quick few sets of items, and right off the bat, I see this one, the Prestige Rogue Equipment Silent Crow. This thing is pretty awesome, and inside of the game, just grinding, you're not really going to find something cooler than this. Maybe you may subjectively think that something is cooler, but generally speaking, the aesthetics of these ones in the cash shop, of course, match really well, and it's hard to put something together that's quite as nice as this by just grinding the game. The next problem is that social aspects are still really lacking in this game. It's kind of difficult to find people in-game to trade with. Most people who are trading are, of course, using third-party websites. Helltides.com is still a pretty useful resource as well, so there's really just a lot of third-party, almost requirements if you really want to engage with all this game has to offer. The in-game social features need a lot of work. The next up is repetitive bosses. We see the same bosses in the Gauntlet, in Nightmare Dungeons, in the Pit. I've probably killed Tomb Lord a million times, and we need a bit more variety, and on top of that, I'd like to see bosses with better mechanics. They should really look at a game like Last Epoch that does a great job at designing difficult bosses that are fun, fair, but also challenging. Next up, still to this day, with all 3 seasons, we have seen some kind of major duping thing that's been going on, either between the Duriel mats or gold, and then trading gets disabled. I really hope that they're able to crack down on this because it really ruins the integrity of the game once these RMT websites get their hands on a bunch of duped materials, and then players just kind of cheat their way to the end of the game by spending money. Of course, there's not really too much you can do to stop the RMT altogether, but the duping really needs to be addressed because that's what makes these things so affordable and really encourages people to go and buy from cheaters. And the last problem that I had mentioned in my prior video that still exists is that new players are, in my opinion, a little discouraged from getting into this game. Specifically because of things like the Altar of Lilith and Renown. We don't have to go through these things anymore on a season-to-season basis because we've already completed our Renown, we've got all the altars, but a brand new player who wants to come in, say you've got a friend who wants to come in and play with you, there's a big barrier right there. They have to go and farm 160 Altars of Lilith. That is just such a substantial waste of time, and it's something that most people don't really enjoy, just looking up these maps on, again, third-party websites that we're kind of like forced to use if you really just want to get through it quickly so that you can go play with your friends. And then, of course, the Renown system, I don't think that's quite as bad to have to go through one time. It's mostly the Altars of Lilith. I genuinely think they should just be removed from the game, and the stats that they give should just be given to all brand new players so that new players are a little bit more encouraged to come and engage and not have to go through all this tedious work just to play with their friends. Now let's go ahead and get into a few positive things. In my last video, I had noted that the 1.1.0 patch, which came out right before Season 1, had substantially nerfed our characters, and this needed to be done because Malignant Hearts were right around the corner and they added a ton of power to our characters. However, the order at which they did this was wrong. They nerfed our characters into the ground before Season 1 was introduced, and this really hurt Eternal characters because you really needed some strong gear to be good on Eternal on that patch because you didn't have the Malignant Hearts to bring you up. I think this problem is pretty much fixed now. Eternal Realm characters feel plenty strong. In Season 3 we have the Seneschal, but if I took this character after the season, lost my Seneschal, it would still be incredibly strong. And of course, at the time I had made the prior video, the open world was pretty much dead. All monsters were capped at level 95. The Tree of Whispers basically didn't give any meaningful rewards because this was prior to Varshan, Grigor, all the Uber bosses, and so all we did was grind Nightmare Dungeons over and over, and it's good that they have brought meaning back to the open world. If you'll recall, in the past, item affixes when you had dropped an item were all in a random order. There was no priority or anything. For example, these rings are always going to have crit chance at the top. Back originally when the game had launched, that could be anywhere on the item, and so evaluating items just took so long when this game had launched, and it's really nice to see that they had actually changed the order of these so they're easier to review. Of course, in Season 3, there's still way too many useless stats on all of our gear. Itemization is still kind of poor. However, right around the corner, and I've been playing the PTR, itemization is looking like it's going to get a lot better. And next up, there's so many rare and legendary items that are dropping on the ground. This has been kind of a problem since launch through Season 3. This is going to be another issue that appears to be getting fixed with Season 4. We're no longer going to need to pick up the rares, and so we're not going to be needing to spend a ton of time in town at the blacksmith salvaging all this different gear. You can basically ignore the rares now and just pick up legendaries, and so it seems as though we're going to be spending a lot more time fighting monsters as opposed to vendoring or salvaging gear. Now, of course, back when I made my last video, the only real way to build a character, I suppose there were a few exceptions to this, was going the crit strike chance, crit damage, vulnerable damage route. These were the multiplicative stats, everything else was just additive and kind of seemed meaningless, and so all characters were just built in the same way. This has definitely been fixed already at this point in the game. Now you've got certain Paragon nodes, of course, that will give you a certain amount of multiplicative damage when you get certain stats, and so it's nice to see that all characters aren't being built the exact same way. Another issue that did exist, and I'm not 100% sure, I suppose, if this one is fixed, but back when the game had launched, each time we had leveled up, there was a lot of people complaining about how we feel weaker each time we level up, because the expectation is that, of course, we're going to be getting new pieces of gear as we level up, and more stat points, and so the monsters get stronger, but when you just level up and the monsters go up a level, and you don't necessarily get any new gear, you're kind of just weaker. I generally feel like this problem has been fixed in the game because same level content is just incredibly easy now. There's like no challenge whatsoever to completing same level content, and so as you level up and level up, even though the monsters get like a little bit stronger, the game going up to level 100 is just incredibly easy now. The next issue, of course, is that at the time there was no endgame whatsoever. 4 or 5 months ago, we did not have the Uber bosses. The open world was meaningless, and so all we really did was farm nightmare dungeons. It's really nice to see that, of course, they added the Uber bosses, so we've actually got something to farm. We have a reason to go into the open world to do the Helltides for the Living Steel, the Varshan mats through the Tree of Whispers. It's nice to see that we're incentivized to actually do things to engage with an endgame system where we fight these Uber bosses. And then, of course, with Season 4 right around the corner, we're also going to be getting the pit and this pretty nice crafting system, and so I feel like the endgame is pretty much going to be generally flushed out to a good extent, starting with Season 4. And, of course, when Diablo 4 had launched, there was absolutely no reason to farm higher-level nightmare dungeons. There wasn't really any more reward that came with it. Everything in the game that you wanted to push towards was simply aspirational. There was no real reward for pushing the nightmare dungeons. You'd actually just get less gear, and it was kind of a less effective thing to do. I really like what they did with Season 3, where all the item level 925 gear is generally going to come from those higher level nightmare dungeons, so they do really encourage you to kind of push your character to the limit. One note that I will make is that, of course, this is changing with Season 4, and all item level 925 gear is going to drop from any monster level 95 or higher now. It's going to be guaranteed. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this change, because it kind of feels like they're moving back in that direction where pushing the nightmare dungeon tiers kind of feels meaningless. If we're just getting 925 gear by doing same level content at 95 to 100, why would we push any higher? I suppose now we have the pits to add some kind of challenge to the game. However, it's sort of weird because it does make the higher nightmare tiers seem a bit irrelevant. The next issue that was fixed was the mount. I had complained so much about the mount in the last video that it gets stuck on everything. It's too slow in town. For the most part, they seem to have fixed the mount. It's still a little clunky, but it works fine. I still wish we could use the sprint feature while in town, but nevertheless, it's generally a lot better than it was. I had also complained that we were unable to zoom out our camera. It is so wonderful to see in the PTR that we are actually going to be able to zoom it out a bit more, so hopefully no more getting off-screen by a corpse bow. I'm going to go a little rapid fire in these next few issues that have been fixed in the game just to kind of get these out of the way so that we can get into the next section. It's nice to see that we are not forced to do the renown grind each season. Uber uniques are actually obtainable now by killing the Uber bosses instead of it being something that was so rare that you were basically more likely to win the lottery. Stash space was way too limited because we were hoarding all these different aspects and they were only adding 1 tab per season. Of course, with the changes coming up to the Codex of Power, I don't think that stash space is going to be an issue in the slightest. And at the time that I had made my last video, there was no button to undo your Paragon board. I had complained quite a lot about that, and so very nice to see that, of course, if I pull this up, I can refund all now. And of course, the lack of crafting is something that I had mentioned in my last video as well. Of course, in Season 3, we still don't really have any crafting other than hitting upgrade 5 times and going to see the occultist for our 1 reroll, but the tempering and masterworking system actually seem to be pretty well done. Alrighty, and to round out this video, I want to go ahead and talk about the problems with Diablo 4 that I had mentioned in my prior video that I'm not entirely clear if these are fixed yet. Maybe they've been improved to some extent, so let's go ahead and dive into those. As we had mentioned earlier, just too many conditional affixes, damage to close, damage to stunned. In the Season 4 PTR, we still have a lot of affixes that are similar to this through the tempering system. Generally, I haven't seen these affixes on items that just drop out in the open world, which is nice, but it is strange that they still seem to have a lot of these oddly conditional, specific aspects that that we can get through the tempering system. It's nice that we have some control over them now. However, it is still strange. Nevertheless, they have cleaned up itemization in a pretty big way. Next up is dungeon objectives. They've kind of addressed this. They've made it easier to interact with certain items, untie people. These actions seem to happen a little bit faster now. They've removed the objectives altogether from several different dungeons. However, I feel like most people are just kind of tired of the objectives altogether. As nice as it is to see them making changes to make it more convenient, I think the general consensus among the player base is that we just kind of want them gone. Leave a comment down below if you disagree and you'd like to see the dungeon objectives remain. I'm sure there are people out there, but generally speaking, I think that most people are on board to just kind of do away with them. Next up, a little bit unclear on this, dungeon backtracking was something we'd complained a lot about, and they fixed the layouts of several dungeons actually to make this significantly better. However, there are still certainly some dungeons out there where backtracking is definitely a real thing, and so we'll see if they continue to develop on this or not, but generally speaking, I think this is mostly fixed. So if you'll recall, several months ago, Blizzard had posted that every time you see another player out in the open world, like these 3 guys right here, that we are loading their entire stash and their entire inventory and their character sheets and everything. This was suspected to be causing performance issues, and Blizzard specifically said that this is why they can't just give us more stash space. I haven't really heard any updates on this from Blizzard, and the community's kind of stopped talking about it in general, but I'm really wondering if they're working on some kind of fix for this, because that undoubtedly has some kind of impact on the performance of this game. And my last complaint from my prior video was that we didn't really have any conjuration builds. They had made balance changes based on feedback from a level 25 beta, in which they had nerfed the Hydra Sorcerer completely into the ground. However, the next season with the PTR right now, we do have the Frozen Orb Sorcerer who is making these conjurations that are throwing out frozen orbs, and so I'm hoping that this is going to remain a viable build. It looks really strong in the PTR, and I am confident some kind of nerf is coming to it, but hopefully it remains strong so that we finally got some kind of build where we've got these little conjurations, little turrets that are firing out at enemies. I generally feel like this playstyle has just kind of been missing in Diablo 4. Yeah, we've got like the minions and the armies, and they've kind of been a little weak. Also really nice to be seeing them getting a big buff coming up with Season 4. So my ultimate question to you guys is, do you think that this is enough to save Diablo 4? If I had to give my personal opinion, I think that it is, and I really enjoy Diablo games. I've wanted this game to be a good game, something that I engage with frequently and always feel like I have something to do. I think that the tempering and masterworking systems are going to add so much to the end game to allow us to really optimize our character and actually spend a lot of time playing and pushing towards something. But I'd especially like to know from the players who quit several seasons ago, is this enough to bring you back? Is anything ever going to be enough to bring you back? A lot of players quit at the launch of Diablo 3 due to the way that the game had originally launched. It was very poor, and a lot of people just didn't come back, and that's completely understandable. I'm hoping that this is not the same problem for Diablo 4, but only time will tell. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you on the next one.